We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you. All right, thank you. I've got 6 o'clock. I'm sure we're going to have some people trickling in. There's just only a couple seats, and then you have to have them stack up in the back there, Paul. Thank you for coming. Tonight's the Goerke Park Community Input Meeting. You've probably seen some information releases. We appreciate you coming out here to the KB Willet to talk through it. A couple housekeeping items. Obviously, this meeting's probably going to go for a period of time. If you do need a restroom, go ahead. Go out. The restroom's just to the left of the door. There's a hallway next to this room that you can go through, and that's where the restrooms are located. If you haven't silenced your cell phones, please do so. Just make sure something doesn't go off. And if you do have a cell phone ringing, I'll just ask for you to step out as you go. I am going to ask everyone to hold your questions for after the presentation, so those that can't stay for the whole meeting are able to hear the whole presentation, and that the questions don't stop us from getting through the materials. If you do have a question, though, we're going to try to get everybody's questions answered. Due to the pure volume of people here, we're going to try to go one question at a time and kind of get everybody the opportunity to ask a question, then we'll come back. If you have multiple questions, no problem. We'll try to get through them. We are saying that at about 2 hours, if we get that long, we're going to break it, and if you have more questions, just hang around. I'll stay as long as I need to get through everything. But certainly we know people have places to be, and we want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So the agenda tonight is to go through that planning steps and process and timeline. Those of you that were here at 5 o'clock, some of it's going to sound familiar. We'll then get into the current draft of the Goerke Park Master Plan. We'll go into that questions and answers, and then we're going to close at the end talking about the surveys. Oop, I'm sorry. Bear with me here. Okay, who am I and what is my role? My name is Dan Kramer. I'm the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry for the City of Stevens Point. I've been with the city since 2019. I've served in 2 other cities before I came to work here. I'm about 14 years or so into the field. My role is really the primary planning facilitator in the process. So ultimately, I'm the conduit from the user groups that reserve our facilities and work through the different things that we own in the parks. And I really relay the information in this process that we get from community input, as well as the user groups, back to the Common Council and the Park Commission. I physically do not have a vote in what actually goes into these plans. It is those 2 bodies that will make the ultimate decisions between our draft format we're in now, a next draft, and ultimately a final approval. I can make recommendations. Certainly in my 6 years here, there's a lot of different feedback that comes through my office, a lot of demands, a lot of asks, and we're trying to balance what we can accommodate and what we can. But my recommendation is just that. From there, it'll be our Parks Commission that will look at the survey data. They're hearing from lots of you, so is our council members, and they will point staff and tell us what we're going to draw back in for a next vision or version, and then will lead to some sort of adoption in the future. It is our Park Commission that oversees the authority in the city park system. So they are the committee, there's 11 members, that actually vote on what we do, but they are advisory to the Common Council. So there's a couple steps that have to happen in this process, and if you've heard differently, it's not true. We are in draft format. We are taking the gauge of the community input. After the community input is collected, it'll go before the Park Commission. They will review it. They will take another shot at what they want to see keep going forward, what might change, and then we will move on to Common Council eventually in the future. And that is where we are at. So we are happy you were here. We wanted you here. We want your feedback. Nothing to the contrary is true. And if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to go over more specifics of the steps as we keep going through the process. After the final approval is adopted by the Park Commission, it's still not done. The Common Council holds the ultimate authority. So sometimes these processes take multiple months, and if there's revisions, it has to go another month in delay to get to the Park Commission again, and then they pass it up the chain to the Common Council, who meets the third Monday of the month every month. Once we get to adoption, then that plan actually goes into our file. The master planning process is not uncommon. So we start with the corp, which I'll talk about next. We take our corp document, I'll explain what that is, and we move into master plan so we can start kind of painting the vision of what the park might look like. A master plan is not a final document that it's absolutely being built. Master plans don't even have funding plans with them. They're really the best shot, especially in a park like this that's been 100 years in the development, of what the next 50 years or so might look like, or even longer, and plans certainly change over time. I do have a co-planning chair that's been volunteering alongside this process. That gentleman is Tim Sherrill, who's here tonight. Tim Sherrill is the co-CEO of Sherrill Companies, and he's 100% a volunteer in this process. Tim has helped support the department significantly through the years. In 2007 and 2022, he helped my department lead massive multi-million-dollar fundraiser campaigns for this park, for Goerke Park. He's a lifelong resident in Stevens Point. Tim and his wonderful wife raised 6 children that were multi-sport athletes that graduated from Stevens Point. So very vested. He's coached for over 17 years for multiple sport, including lots of them that use our 2 parks that we're master planning for. And he's been a huge advocate for families, park development, and making improvements for our athletics. I also want to mention that Team Sherrills has been a lead donor for our big projects in 2007 for Goerke, in 2019 for Xenoff, and again in 2022 for the Goerke Turf Project and stadium upgrade. Tim, do you mind just standing up so everybody knows who you are in case they haven't met you? I sure can, you bet. I'll try. So how did we get here, okay? So this process is ongoing in the park system. We're continually planning, but in 2022, we did our 50,000 square foot or 100,000 square foot comprehensive outdoor rec plan. That is what a CORP document is that those of us in the Park and Rec will talk about. What the CORP is it's really a gauge of what we've accomplished over the last 5 years in the park system. It's a look back at the last document of maybe what the goals and objectives were, and it's kind of a refresh of what we've done, as well as any new trends in the industry or in the community of what's being asked for within the city's park system. So we did a survey, and we had community input meetings back then. There was 1,700 surveys that we collected during that process. The biggest element of the CORP that aids the city is that if it's in the CORP, if there's something in the park system, it can become grant eligible for the state stewardship program through the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and the state of Wisconsin. So CORP documents are very common across the state. Very common in Stevens Point. We've done them 5 or 6 times already, and then we update them every 5 years to make sure that we have a snapshot in time of what we're doing. It's a big document. It even labels who the park commissioners were at that time. Talks about different park projects. All of that's in that, but it's very high level. I'll show you what that sheet for Goerke looks like in a moment. When we did that project or that process, we adopted that plan in April of 23. At the same time, our police department has been trying to put a garage in Goerke Park to cover their squads for, I think it's going on over a decade when the police department moved here. And our budgets have been incredibly tight at the city level, if you've been following along. So ultimately, as directors, we've been told that we should find grant funding when opportunities exist. So a FEMA representative contacted the city back then and made the police chief and myself aware that there is a grant program through the BRIC program, which is a building resiliency, I'm gonna get the last 2 right, but it's kind of a storm shelter style grant that we could try to go after. So we worked through the city's finance committee alongside Chief Cuso, who's in the back of the room, as well as myself and the city alders at the time. And we were given permission to lay out a garage that would be shared between the forestry unit, who already has a garage in Goerke, I'll show that in a minute, and the PD, who is desirous of acquiring a garage in the park. That grant was unsuccessful in 2024. When we went public with that, the Boys and Girls Club contacted us immediately, and they said they would like to expand in Goerke Park, and they've been asking that of our department for several years. Boys and Girls Club does a tremendous amount of good for our community, and they've been a partner of the city for a long time. When we started having those conversations, we kept bumping in to pool issues with our aquatic center. If you read the paper over the last 6 months, you know that our pool is currently busted up. We have asbestos pipes, it's over 70 years old. We will put it back together, it will be open, but we are on a clock that our pool is really getting to the end of its useful life. Additionally, when we did the surveys, I'll mention this later, the #1 item in the surveys was an aquatic center outdoor pool. That's what our community was asking for. Pickleball was #2, in case you were curious. I will tell you that in order for the Boys and Girls Club to ever have an opportunity, or for community gymnasiums to be improved, for that opportunity to exist, we need to relocate the Park, Rec, and Forestry and construct a garage. I'll call it the first domino that must fall to see some other improvements. Those were the things that were swirling back then that led us to say, it's time to do a master plan for Goerke Park. This is the page that is currently in the CORP, if you've heard about it or if you've not looked it up yourself. It's page 120. The full plan is available on the city website. This is also the place where you've probably heard about the city's interest in houses on Price Street. I'm going to clear that up so you know what that means. What it means is the park has a significant amount of usage, to the tune of 200,000+ just for the areas that the city controls. We can't run cell phone ping data on the school or the PD. That's what we see come through these doors already. There's a lot of usage. I don't have to tell all of you that live next to the park about it. But when you looked at the survey, what the city said was, if a home goes for sale, even if it's not on this drawing, the city can look at the real estate listing and they can make an offer. The city has bought several houses through the last couple decades. The most recent one is on Price Street at 2517. But if you rewind that, we own a house at the end of Franklin Street by Piffner Pioneer Park. We bought another house across from Piffner Pioneer Park that was torn down, I think, 2 decades ago. We bought property by the Sculpture Park that has a home on it. The city does have several real estate properties that we control, and when I say control, they've acquired it because our council said someday we might have interest in a relayout of that area. There is no plans to demolish houses along Price Street. One of them that the city owns is currently being reviewed and talked about, which we'll get into for a driveway. It's under consideration. That house is being rented, and it will be rented for the continual future here until the plans get sorted out and future funding opportunities happen. We are not forcing anyone out of their house. There is no offers to your house. A house went for sale after that acquisition. The city passed. They didn't want it. Ultimately, what's being looked at, whether it's on the drawing or not, is as a house comes for sale, it's going to be reviewed. Why? 50 years from now, 100 years from now, we believe Goerke Park is always going to be here. And we believe that there might be times in the future that some more land that is attached to it may be advantageous to what's happening in our community at that point. That's the extent of it. We'll get into some more of that as we get a little further. On this plan, though, the 50,000 square foot view, the master plan was the first item listed as saying, let's lay the park out so as upgrades happen, we know where they're going to go. Additional things are things we've actually already accomplished. The roof on this building was deteriorating. We were taking water on in the Willet. That's been done. The press box for the football stadium is under the capital budget. We intend to re-roof that facility this year and upgrade it. The future of the warming house was called out already in 2022 as let's evaluate it, which is what we're doing. And some other elements, the walking paths, etc. This document is what said, let's move to the next step when time is right. So the process began in June of 2024. So at that time, we enlisted the help of Rettler Corporation, which is a local landscape architect. They help us produce the drawings, lay out the amenities in parks so we can do visual aids to gain feedback from our community, as well as have our commissions look at it and know what they're voting on in the future. At that time, we enlisted to do both Zenoff and Goerke, and now we started to say, how do we get started? We obviously know what's in the park, but what might go into it in the future? So we had preliminary concept idea conversations with what we call kind of the anchor tenants of Goerke Park. The two school districts, public and private, the university, and the Boys and Girls Club. Those are the biggest membership organizations in the park, and all of them have 15-year obligations of repayment to use the stadium already from the project in 2022. In our conversations with those groups, we started with a very bare bones bubble drawing, which I'm going to show you. And it certainly has taken a bigger step forward since that time as the concepts have changed. In November of 2024, we had the first discussion. It then, since that time and through this period, we've had over 43 meetings. There's been about 125 different stakeholders involved. We've doubled that number tonight, obviously, and we've had a lot of feedback with surveys as well to the tune of over 300 already on this project. And we intend to collect as much feedback as we can to shape the future revisions of what this drawing will be before adoption. The second review happened at February 12th. That's probably after that date when you saw something. Why it went to Park Commission and there wasn't public releases is because we were asking the Park Commission, is this drawing ready to be taken public? I have to do that. That's my job. I can't just take something and flush it out to the public. I have to make sure I'm authorized to do that as a staff member. At the February 12th conversation or meeting, there was a lot of conversation, but ultimately the Park Commission said, move forward. Get the survey data, have this meeting, and they wanted the data to come back so they could shape the next version of the drawing. The drawing is not a done deal. It's early on in the stages. Our plan, March, was to have this public input meeting and collect surveys. We're collecting surveys till April 11th. Then that data will be packaged up. Our plan is in May or June, one of those 2 months, and it'll be agended and noticed early. The next public conversation will happen at Park Commission that everyone can attend, view online, and also come and make a comment at if you'd like to. June, July, or August, potentially later, depending upon how many revisions or changes, is when we look to actually adopt the final plan. I mentioned this earlier, but we did have 1,700 surveys back in 2022, and the Aquatic Center was the largest item that people were asking for. This is the bubble drawing on November 6th that was first brought to the Park Commission, and the topics that night centered around a driveway on Price Street, whether it should be evaluated or not. Should the Boys and Girls Club have an opportunity from the city's perspective to potentially expand in the park? And should a larger aquatic center go in the park and be potentially relocated? That was really the big topics. You can watch the meeting that we started with. At that point, the Park Commission said, Dan, go ahead. Let's go see where we go from here with the next versions. We had all those meetings, and we ended up getting to this stage, which is where we are today. Not a done deal. This is just the next draft, and we want to now get the feedback to see what the community supports, what the community doesn't support, so we can adapt and change from there. This was discussed at the Park Commission meeting. It was, again, created based on the feedback we were getting from those other groups. And then this was authorized by the Park Commission to go public, which is why the surveys are open, again, why we're here now. This is the final draft. It's not done, okay? The truth of the matter is where we're at is whether or not what's going to stay in the drawing and what will not stay in the drawing or what revisions have to happen. Nothing is funded in this master plan. Nothing. There's not a dollar raised at this point from the city side with the public funding. Nothing. Our capital budget doesn't have any money in it other than what they did to authorize the start of the master planning process. And other than that, you have to remember that when a plan is adopted, a project of this magnitude typically takes decades, sometimes longer. Oftentimes plans get adopted and changed again, and some of it doesn't come to fruition in totality, right? Some of the biggest things, aquatic center, if you ask me today, I think something's going to happen with an outdoor aquatic center. I believe our community has been pretty loud about doing something there. Other elements might never happen, or there might be other improvements that we haven't arrived at yet. But please know that there's going to be changes coming, and it's going to be based on the feedback that we're receiving. What's in the park today? Those of you that live close and walk the park frequently are probably well aware, but there are several components in the park that aren't as well known. Starting with, we do have shot put and discus already in the park. It is down in this corner. So from a user group standpoint, you have to leave the stadium to see your child if they're doing shot put and discus. This is the home track meet location for our high school. They actually paid for the track for the city back in 2019. So the reason track and field, or I should say shot put and discus is still on the drawing is that it exists in the park today. Additionally, everyone is familiar with the grass space that the parking, overflow parking, parks on for the football field or football games or other games during warm weather months. And then that's the area we flood the ice rink. I will tell you, if you build a business in the city of Stevens Point or you build a new football field, it's not permittable to have a grass parking lot, okay? That's why you see when businesses go up, we were grandfathered because the park was developed in the 1930s. So I just mentioned that as an FYI, that the city is held to standards as we do upgrades, just like any other business is. The city can't say, do as I say, not as I do. We have to factor that in as we look at upgrades. Next, we have the Parker Building, which is the original locker rooms in the park back from 1933, which we're going to talk about in a second, as well as the warming house for our ice skating activities. We have the hockey rink, and then we have what is first and primary, the Point Fast Pitch's 2 main diamonds for their operations. It's also the outdoor FIAD classroom for the school district. Youth football practices here. We have an ultimate frisbee program that uses it. We also have the middle school football program that uses it. And when we have activities that don't fit in the stadium, they also spill out into that location. The fences go up temporarily. So while there's no fences on it, some of you might remember it used to be called Big Goerke and Little Goerke because there was a large fence on one of the fields and a smaller fence. That went away to make the fields more flexible years ago. So there's been some changes here. But this used to be 2 diamonds with fences. Now it's more of a flexible space, but still the home of youth softball. We have 6 tennis courts that are actually the varsity tennis courts for Pacelli by contract. We have 3 of them lined for pickleball as a secondary use and 3 lined for junior tennis as a secondary use. We have approximately a 30,000 square foot pool facility, again, that dates back to the late 50s. This is what we call West Willett, which is used for a multitude of reasons. Before the stadium agreements, if I'm being honest, the school used this a lot because they didn't have to pay for it. We've worked that all out through the agreements that happened in 2022. And now this field is housing almost all activities other than practices for the youth, as well as some of the overflow games. This field sees a tremendous amount of recreation, though, no doubt about it. We have the KB Willett Arena, which was originally constructed in 1980. It's been added on a couple different times. Everyone's familiar with the football field that hosts soccer, lacrosse, and a multitude of activities. We have the former Midstate building, which is currently now the police department. The police department occupies everything but 4 classrooms in this east corridor. That is currently leased by the Boys and Girls Club. But those classrooms are owned by the city, and that's what's under consideration for if the consolidation of the Parks Department would go into those classrooms that are owned by the city. The PD garage doesn't exist, so all of their squads park currently behind the building. And then the Boys and Girls Club, back when they built their facility, tore down a wing of the rec center. There used to be another wing, built their headquarters, and they're attached to the city's own gymnasium. We have an agreement. That's why those of you that use the gym for different activities during the day, that's the city's side of the gym that we own. Then they use it when the kids are out of school for Boys and Girls Club activities. We rent it in the evenings and weekends. The rec center is this wing here, which is where my office is and some of my staff. And then our forestry department garage is the eastern wing. In case you didn't know, the city actually owns the parking lot that serves PJ Jacobs. So we have an agreement and we work together with the school district. The school district obviously owns the 4 acres to the bottom. In total, there's 29 acres here. There's a lot of user groups. I didn't list them all, but that's kind of the high level of what's currently in the park. We're going to start with some of the questions we've been fielding a lot on right out of the get-go. Why in the heck is a dome on the drawing? The truth of the matter is that there is communities surrounding us that are starting to construct these facilities. And there's been a growing demand by user groups, not just in Goerke, but in the city as a whole, about trying to build one. When we started talking to our user groups in Goerke, we said, lots of the groups had said, we had looked at it here, we had looked at it there, is it being considered? So we started to talk about it. We learned that the Convention and Visitors Bureau has determined that the #1 tourism facility in need of Stevens Point is a domed athletic complex. At that point, when we talked with our anchor tenants, they said this, and we agree with this. If the community would support something like that, we would certainly use it. So at that point, we said with those reasons, we should see what the community thinks. And that's what we want to know. Certainly the surveys, everybody here, it's an idea, that's it. Once we have the feedback from everybody, that will determine if that facility belongs there or not. But that's why it was included. It was because of all those different elements, the anchor tenants, if the community supported it, we thought we should talk about it. Rather than 5 or 6 people in a room saying, don't do it, we wanted to air it out, get everybody's feedback on it. Historic buildings is the next thing that's been coming out. There's 4 old buildings in our park. The first is the rec center where my office is. Approximately 1921, that's the only building to my knowledge that's on the local eligibility list for historic preservation. That building in our current draft is no longer there. The Fieldhouse locker rooms, the Parker building from 1933, which is not currently, to my understanding, on the historic registry or the eligibility list. Community Stadium's home bleachers were constructed in 1938 under the Wisconsin Works Progress Administration Program, same program that constructed P.J. Jacobs. A common question is, what's the difference between the eligibility list and the actual historic preservation list? My understanding, and I know there's a gentleman in this room that's got it way better than me, is that if you're on the historic, go ahead, why don't you just take it, it'd be better. Do you mind? Can I put you on the spot? Sure, I'll do this. I'll keep it high level. If you're on the eligibility list, it means it's not on the historic preserved list yet, but there is notice requirements before some sort of demo could happen, but it's not listed yet on historic preservation's list, but it's eligible. When it's on the historic preservation's list, there's a lot more requirements before demo could ever be considered, and the idea is that it can never be demoed, right? The exterior improvements got to be underneath it. There's much more complication than that, but that's really the 2 levels to my understanding. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a huge process to get on the national register. I'm John, I'm the director of the Historical Society. There is a huge process to get on there, and first you have to go through the State Historic Preservation Office to get it as a state landmark, or on the state register, and after that you're then eligible for the national register, and there are different levels of protection in both states.
Great, thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, I appreciate that. Okay, to go even more specific into the Parker building. So we know it was initially a locker room for the field house in this location, long before the KB Willett was ever built. The building's not on those 2 lists, as I mentioned, but the basement is used by Point Fast Pitch and Baseball for storage. That's the primary usage of the building throughout the year. Other than that, approximately 20 days a year this last 6 to 8 years, the way the weather's been, we've been opening that building about 20 days per year, sometimes less. How it works is we have a vendor that does not pay any revenue to the city that offers hot chocolate, and they offer skate rentals out of that building. And it's done as a quality of life item. The city can't afford to put the person in it to be there all around the clock. They were willing to do it, but they couldn't afford to pay the city rent and also try to make a profit off of selling the product that they sell. So it's offered as a quality of life item. I will tell you, because of the age of the building and the way it's constructed, it doesn't meet any health codes. There's not hand wash sinks, there's not food prep areas, there's no stainless steel counters, none of that stuff that modern standards require for the type of vending that would want to be done there. So it's really a modification, and it's a quality of life. It's allowed to go on, but if you get into the permitting side of it, there is several elements that have to play a role. Other than that, the building stopped being used for locker rooms about 40 years ago. It's primarily storage. The Willett is what uses all of the locker rooms today inside the park. Discussions have said about, well, what if it was demolished? What would happen? Preliminary discussions are saying the idea would be to preserve the exterior and some of the facade. Could some of those materials be incorporated into a new building? That's one thought. Not saying it's the right one, it's just one. Second thought is, what if we did renovate it? What if we found another usage for it? We ran the math. If it's about 3,800 square feet, which is what we get on the main floor, if you took $150 a square foot, and then if you go into the basement, which is the most difficult part of that building, if you've ever been down there, the 2 youth groups can talk about it, you're looking at probably $600,000 or more in replacement. So that would just be a capital outlay the city would need to prepare for if our community ends up saying that building needs to be saved, certainly in the discussion. The third option is move it. Where can it go? At this point in our planning efforts, we've been unable to identify a vendor that says the size of that building with the height restrictions, overhead wires, as well as the construction, that has said, yes, I can move it. But I can tell you, we do not know everything. So if somebody knows of a vendor that says, actually, we believe that's possible, we will talk to them tomorrow. Send the number, send the contact. We're happy to know. The more information we can give the Park Commission on those three fronts, the better the decision they can make when we get into these discussions going forward. That's really the way we're summing it up with the Parker building. There is three options. Can you save it? The one thing that we're trying to hesitate to is doing nothing, because it's going to continue to deteriorate. And if you've ever been in that basement, you would see what the status of that building is today. The next one is the outdoor hockey rink. That area is about 25,000 square feet if you take the rink itself and the area immediately adjoining it. The rest of the year, it's only been open again. Some weeks, some years, it's been 8 weeks. Some years it's 1 week. We've been averaging between 3 to 6 because we do have to shut down when it warms up, remake ice. The rest of the year, we chain it shut. You can't get in that space. If the final version of the plan did not include a hockey rink, we're not taking it out of the park system. Our goal is to not remove something from our park system. We would have to identify a place that would go first. So it's not a demo and deal with it later. It would be, okay, if it doesn't make this plan, we got a plan for where it goes in the city before we would actually determine that that's going to be taken down. Ideas thrown around is, could it go in Iverson because all the other winter operations there? I don't know that answer today, but it's a consideration. Secondly, there is talk, because housing is growing to the east, is there going to be a new community park over there? In our corp document, we would like one. I don't know for sure, but we've discussed, could it fit on a new community park as well? Those are a couple options. We have lots more parks, but certainly that element cannot go away if it doesn't make the final version in Goerke Park. Special note, again, I'm just going to reiterate this. Our goal is not to take away from our park system, but we are looking at the space and the usage and trying to identify what the best is for 52 weeks of the year, not just a few weeks of the year, given some of the challenges we have with winters. The next big item is the Price Street driveway. This is not a Park Rec and Forestry Department request. We are looking at public safety within our planning. A big portion that we're going to talk about with the school district and the drop-off. Our police department, Chief Cuso is here, has told us they are very interested and have been looking to try to get additional access. As the Parks Director and the Parks Department, we are cognizant of public safety, and we support that department to say, if it works and if it can work, we're okay with it. But I will tell you, from a Park and Rec standpoint, getting to our facilities, we do not need that. If questions come up on Price Street's driveway, Chief Cuso is going to come up and help kind of field those questions related to the response times and access here later. With that, we'll now get into the nuts and bolts of the actual plan draft where it sits today. So we've talked about a couple big elements. I just want to tell you kind of how it fits. This is the garage footprint for the PD and the Forestry Department. If this is grant funded, again, first domino to fall, it would free up the areas that the current city offices are in now. The way that this current floor plan lays out, the Boys and Girls Club is saying potentially, we don't speak for the Boys and Girls Club, but they certainly are examining, could they do an expansion here that would remove the current community gymnasium, build a better one, and then have things like a teen center or other amenities that they would get into their design onto. So that's what this is showing here. One is connected to the other. If that happened, the thought process was, well, the main access, rather than shooting around this blind corner, could it be this parking lot? We met with the school district. We learned that the drop-off is a massive concern for them, and the police department as well is having significant problems with traffic backing up on Michigan and Maine. I think everyone's probably aware of it if you've been through it at 7 or 3. So we discussed, well, is there a way to bring that off the road into this parking lot and make the parking lot double or triple to serve both visitors, after events, after school, summer, as well as things for the Boys and Girls Club? So what we came up with was, if we separated the cars from the bus, so if you were a car, we would close off the Michigan drop-off, cement it in, or put a boulevard in with trees. Cars could drive in and go around the lot, exit back out, turn right. So that's the car route. This drop-off lane is about 4 times longer than the one on Michigan Avenue. That doesn't work if the buses still have to come off of Michigan through the parking lot. You'd be conflicting. So we said we have to solve the bus issue. With the school's guidance and their transportation director, and sitting and watching the drop-off for about 2 weeks straight, we identified if we could bring the buses in and they could turn right down a bus lane, you would ultimately have kind of a zipper effect where buses would come here, load out the right side of the bus, unload and load, so students aren't crossing in front of it. They would head back to Main Street and turn out. So your cars are going north, your buses are going west, you don't have the overlap. At night, the same thing is true. The buses could stack in the bus lane, load, and leave. What that also allows is, if the teachers, which is what we talked about secondarily, did not have to park here, we could open the lot for visitors as well as parents, morning and night, throughout the day, to visit both facilities or wait for their children or drop their children off and go into school with them. So lot 13 from here over started. We said, okay, if teachers were to park down here, it would open this lot so that you have less congestion in the morning. Teachers have a direct route into the southeast corner. This is just concept again, not speaking for the school district. These are just ideas we came up with. So that is why the first lot got placed here. This is not a road in and out of the park. The idea is it would be gated and it'd be able to be open for their bus transportation. From there, when that came together, we sat down with the police department and the school, and we felt that was a solid concept. So we targeted over here. We said, if you want to put the bus lane in, both ball diamonds have to move because they are hugged tight to the sidewalk today. So if you slide that road in, move the fields over, you're reconstructing the lights and you're reconstructing the fields and the grading. So at that point, talking about the dome, more utilization of the space, this idea was placed. If this idea would go forward, it's going to be the busiest with people coming to the park when the teachers are not present. So again, after school, weekends, summer, evenings, this lot would double for a facility like that. Even if it's not that facility, it would still serve a turf if it was to be 2 ball diamonds. We then talked about the larger aquatic center and a 50,000 square foot layout. This is an outdoor pool. So pool, aquatic, a couple slides could go in here. You'd be able to do activity areas, so basketball hoops, rock climbing walls. This space is so big, we could make it much better than what it is today, or you could scale down depending upon a design. The community would weigh in on that design. This is just a footprint. An aquatic center is busiest in the summer, as we all know. That's when this is the least busy. This facility is shut down the whole school year when this facility is the busiest. So the thought process was these were not conflicting uses. We already have significant pool traffic coming in, over the 2,000 to 12,000 people a year to our current pool. So that's why those uses were together. Another point, a building is needed for a pool for changing, buying concessions, as well as coming and going in and out of the pool. If you have a dome structure, you need a building for an interlock, and you need concessions, you need locker rooms, you need the similar facilities. If you were able to build a shared use building, it could serve both purposes, and you wouldn't have as much of a capital outlay to try to do 2 buildings in separate places. Additionally, a pool building only is used for 10 to 12 weeks a year. So the kind of capital outlay for it, while it's a tremendous quality of life item, it doesn't serve a lot of purpose during the rest of the year. So that is why Building 12 is placed where it is. You could enter and see both facilities. Then, as you look at the rest of the parking lot, we talked about when you build facilities, there is an occupancy load, and our zoning department will review it. And there is parking requirements for new structures. Did not exist back in the day, they exist now. So as we were looking at these type of upgrades, we were looking at also parking that already exists in the neighborhood streets and saying, could you bring more into the park to lessen that burden? Certainly a big area that's being reviewed and feedback's being collected on. But if this parking lot was to be that size, you've now moved shot put and discus. You can't have a track event without it. Shot put and discus, the discus throws out in the grass, so having the main area up front is why that's positioned the way it is. The shot put has some more of a dirt infield, but that also can be hugged on this right side of the green space. And additionally, you have a sight line from the home bleachers. So parents, if they didn't want to, would no longer have to leave the track meet. They could see them from this location. As we started talking about more of the layout, we said we would like to have the biggest area green space as we could. We wanted to keep ice skating in the park. This green space was laid out with the tennis courts moving to try to make it as big as a football field or as close to it as we could get. This would allow Phi-Ed classes that wouldn't be using the dome during the day to also be able to use green space, youth football, ultimate frisbee, regular park users, anything else that would go on during the warm weather season could be in the center, and then we could flood that in the winter. This bathroom facility, because it's not designed, it's just a placeholder, would be a 12-month bathroom. It could have a back room on it that would allow skate rentals to still happen out of it so that you still could rent skates. Hockey is not included up here. There's no boards. It's shown right now as just ice skating. The tennis courts were relocated to allow that green space to be longer and have a larger playing surface. These tennis courts would still serve for Pacelli and the general community, and then we would try to line 12 pickleball courts east to west on them where temporary nets could go up. And that was a feedback item we got from the pickleball group. There's no playground in the park today, so what's shown here is that a playground could go on the south corner here that would be poured in place like Cash Playground, and then a basketball court that currently exists back here would be moved out to the front. You'll also notice that Sims Avenue, which is gravel today, is shown as being hardscaped. That would be based on whether or not the school would like to use that for another access point for buses, because in theory, our gate system could still work if they chose to, their option, if they wanted to have buses come from 2 directions to come in, depending upon their transportation networks. Next is the parking lot. The parking lot has been an idea, I think, that was brought up long before my time. Where it got brought in here was due to ADA accessibility. We currently, if you need to park at the Willett, this is the main entrance. If you're coming to any spectator event, this lot typically fills with early game personnel, athletes, etc. So you have to walk around or park in a neighborhood street, walk sometimes around the block and back around the park, or you need to park on this side. Our handicap accessible stalls for the west side are over here. The way this lot is laid out is that the accessible stalls would go over on this corner and this corner to serve the football stadium's west entrance, as well as the main Willett Arena. Additionally, it would bring 100 cars out of the neighborhood streets into the park. That's the thought process. We then looked at the pedestrian network, or how you traverse the park on foot or by not motor vehicles. Currently, there's just a path on the north side and it dead ends by the garage. What's in here today is a path that goes all the way to that same location with a crosswalk and then a sidewalk down from north-south instead of having to walk through the lot as you do today. You'd hit another series of crosswalks where you could go west to Michigan or south to Maine. You could take the top side of the development of the park and walk here if you wanted to do circles from clockwise, or you could head south down to Main Street and walk inside networks up and around in the park if you wanted to. So ultimately, instead of having a path to quote-unquote nowhere, we were trying to add more locations people could go through the park and be around the different areas of the park. The Parker building, again, impact here is obviously in the location where this parking is shown and or the new building and these other amenities. And depending upon how those conversations go would shape how some of these things could lay out now. I believe I've covered the main elements. Okay, we're gonna come back to the slide. In case anybody has to go early, again, reminders, we're gonna ask you all to fill surveys out on different opinions that you have on it, what you support, what you don't. This is the survey link, www.stevenspoint.com/surveys. Additionally, if you would like to make public comment at the public discussions, this is going to be discussed in public, you can attend our Park Commission meetings. They're at 6:30 on the first Wednesdays of the month. We typically have 10 of them a year. Sometimes we do cancel them. We're planning right now for May 7th or June 4th to be the next public discussion based on hopefully the feedback you all give in surveys from here, as well as what the commission members are hearing, and also what we're gaining from our user groups. You can watch them online if you can't attend. So they're on our website live streamed, and they're recorded on YouTube. And basically, those elements are available for the public as well. At this point, I'm going to turn it open to questions, and I'm going to go back to this slide.
Hi. So in the meeting about Xenon, you did a good job of outlining like what the community impact and like how the industries will be impacted by the new field. I was wondering if you could also outline that for this presentation as well, what the community impact is.
Yes, I can attempt to. There is several layers to a plan of this size and in a community park. So first and foremost, there's impact on the neighborhood. The neighborhood here is attached to a community park, and a community park is significantly different than a neighborhood park. However, this park is surrounded by a neighborhood. So upgrades of this magnitude, traffic flows, people that get drawn in here, there would be impact of those that are closest to the park. So there's that side of impact to start. Secondly, when you talk about structures, if a facility like a dome went forward, you are going to pick up a ton of usage that does not currently exist from September until May. It would lend itself for, if you look outside today, right, this time of year, you'd have practices in there likely every day, for the whole period of time at night, and it would lend itself to probably having people rent it. We're hearing that some of the other facilities of this nature, communities reach out and ask if they could rent it to hold competitions. So there is definitely a draw to a facility like that. A pool facility like this, when you make it larger, based on what I've been told from our surrounding communities like Marshfield, once they build a new facility that has the new amenities, oftentimes they do see an increase in participation. People come to try to use it. So you're definitely going to draw more there as well. So, and the list can go on, right? There's impact to Boys and Girls Club membership if they do an expansion. I'm assuming there's significant impact to the school district if they have a safer drop-off from their parent feedback. So I think to give you a full answer to that, we'd have to probably sit down and write out everything because there is impact to several organizations. There's also modifications that have to happen. Point Fast Pitch cannot afford to have that roof go on without a permanent home. So we know that Xenoff, why these are tied together, is we would have to plan before anything like that would happen that we can facilitate their operations and that they would be an agreeable party. We want to make sure our partners we've been partners with are not having subtractions. The goal would be to be additions.
Perfect, thank you. How much light pollution is going to be caused by this? I mean, are these lights going to stay on in the parking lots all night long? They're going to go off at 11? When you like blowing, people go, you get curtains in?
So in concept phase, we do not do light studies, and we have not laid out where light poles or anything of that nature would go. What I can tell you is that there's lights on the dome structure underneath where there's no dome today, so there's lights on the whole area, and a lot of the things at night are lit. A roof structure, obviously those lights would be inside of it, but the truth of it is when the concept would move forward, there would have to be a photometric study done. I will tell you the new LED lights that must go on the other manufacturers that we buy from, they've actually gotten better at the light pollution side of it. The most recent example you'll get to see is if you've ever been to the Buchholz Ball Diamond, we're just about to connect the LED lights. We just upgraded there. I would encourage you to take a look. They actually focus them a little more, but I can't tell you exactly today how many light poles would need to be on that lot. It would certainly have to be part of it.
We don't know how long the light can stay on until dawn, or they go off at 11?
The most recent example I have is what we did in Sarimer Park. So we use timers. Essentially there what we do is we try to turn them off during the summer at park hours because it's a much shorter darkness window. In the winter we dial that back closer to 9:30 or 10. I don't want to make it a guess here today, but I can tell you this. We likely would be looking at operational items. If there's hockey games, for example, that end at 9, I would think that the demand would be to not have dark spaces for people to walk through. So we probably would have to balance park hours against park usage. We are trying to be very conscious on our sustainability end of timers and having things turn off. I will also tell you that the park industry as a whole is looking more at solar lights and things of that nature. That's a design discussion, so it's not necessarily lumped in with concept, but it's a fair question.
Yes, I'm wondering about a couple of things. Number one would be the traffic in and around that area at the time when all these things are filled up and in use. And the second thing is, I'm wondering about I'm looking at the amount of parking that you have here, and I'm wondering if all these things are being used about parking overflow.
Yeah, great question. So one thing I will tell you is that we do not have, like if you look at the winters, for example, we rely on the residential streets. It's just the truth of how we're set up, basically. The hockey rink, you can park along it, but everything else is basically pushed on residential streets except for the existing lots. So I can tell you in the design detail at this point, we've looked at basically saying we believe we could pull 100 cars more in here and we could pull a couple hundred more cars in here, and our hope was that we could bring some more people in the park necessarily that are going to those locations. What I can't tell you because we haven't gotten to design is, for example, if you use 3 people to a car and you try to figure out maybe size of tournaments, we'd be able to give you a little more impact of what that would be. What I also don't have handy is there is no doubt if you come down here today, PJs might be having a volleyball game or a basketball game, right? We might have the Pointer Men up inside the KB Willett Arena. There might be something going on late at the Boys and Girls Club, and we might be holding community meetings at the PD. The lot fills up, and I'm sure you all experience it. They park all over the place right now. So the idea here of the parking lots in the park was trying to get current with today's parking standards on occupancy. So what we did at this stage is we just sent it to our inspection department and said, if we were doing facilities of this magnitude, is this parking sufficient? And our early indications without design concepts is that they would not require more parking is what they said. So the truth of the matter is, based on the feedback we get and the direction Park Commission ultimately chooses to go, if they say let's include this or include that, we'd have to dig a little further into the final number of stalls and what that impact would be.
So then is the traffic going to be about the same as it's been now, or is there more?
One benefit of this layout is that Main Street is here and there'd be access to parking off of Main Street. So that's one benefit. There's, if you have this entrance, there's certainly going to be more people on Price Street. I don't see any way that would not happen, definitely. There is access, obviously, coming past the police department to get into this lot. But yes, I think what you would probably see is when everything is not going, you'd see less parking on the street. But if you have events in all those locations, you're going to see traffic. There's no doubt.
To piggyback off that, was there a traffic impact analysis done? I know private developers normally have to do that for the city as a requirement, but has the city done it itself for this? Okay, so is that something that's possible? And especially including the neighboring new clinic that's going in to the south?
I'm sure it's possible, and if ultimately the next version was to show parking lots being included, I think certainly we could dig into it deeper. At this point, it's still gauging what the interest is in those locations, but my understanding would be it would certainly be possible. Go ahead.
For the school buses coming over to Main Street, do they all just have to be going, is that west, one that way? Do any of the buses then need to go around and go the other direction?
Can I lean on you guys for a second on?
So typically when the buses leave PJ Jacobs, I'm the principal.
Jennifer, you might come to the front.
Yeah, no problem.
This is Jennifer Connect, the principal for the middle school.
So when the buses are leaving our facility, either in the morning or in the afternoon, they're typically heading back towards Spash. So if they were to come out that way on Main, they would likely immediately turn right onto Michigan and head towards Spash. So that wouldn't impact the bus flow a whole lot from how it is right now.
What about for cars going the other direction? The school buses, they just all come out of there? They're picking up students in the afternoon?
Yep, so right now, the bus is coming through this access lot and they park along here and then they come out and they all turn north to go up to Spash. Yep.
But afterwards, after the improvement, then they just go over and up to Michigan, go that way?
Yep, they would come out here and then up Michigan this way.
They would hit a
Or taking kids home?
Home or in the mornings after they drop kids off too.
Again, I had a question. Building 17. So does this plan mean that the existing rec center would be raised?
Yes. So the way it's shown right now is that the Boys and Girls Club has expressed interest in expansion. So if the Parks Department, as this is grant funded, essentially our Park Rec and Forestry would move into the classrooms. This would be a share use garage. And then the city and the Boys and Girls Club is currently talking about collaboration where they would be able to work with the city to do an expansion. The gym, though, currently is being discussed as being incorporated into that.
Like, can I have a follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're going to be looking for grants? Do all the grants have to be gathered, or a city referendum to raise taxes have to happen before things will be torn down or changed?
Great question. So there's a lot of ways this could be accomplished. I'll tell you the most common that's happened in the past. A plan gets adopted, and let's say our pool starts to really fail here in a year or two. First and foremost, usually the city council will say, and Park Commission, let's prioritize capital budget for an aquatic center. They'd look at an estimate, and they'd say either we're going to use so much money of tax dollars, or I've been directed in a couple other projects, Dan, you have to raise money. And again, to our credit, we've had some great partners that have come along and said, hey, we'll try to raise it. So that's one option. Secondary option is where we come along and we say, hey, there's a grant, which is like we're doing here, and we try to say, hey, city council, can we build this? If we can get a grant for 40%, 60%, will you put the rest in? Other ideas have been raised, right? Could there be a collaborative fundraising approach with all the partners, whether that be private, city putting some capital in, other entities putting capital in? The truth of the matter is there'll have to be as extensive of a business plan for each element as we would get to a plan that's adopted. None of it's funded today. Truth be told, like I said, this domino, if it doesn't fall, the Park Rec and Forestry has every intention to stay right where we're at.
We're going to go back to you, ladies. We'll come back for a second. Okay. I've got a question. Our alderperson, is she here? Yeah, is she here?
Are you in District 2?
Yeah.
Then yes,
Okay.
she is.
I didn't know what you I've never seen you at a meeting before. I didn't even know what you looked like as far as this.
I'm Jackie Guthrie. I'm the district for the Goerke
Yeah,
Park
no door
neighborhood.
knocking and letting your constituents know about any of this isn't super appreciated.
Let's focus on that question.
So, my question here, Dan. So, the Pointers lost their hockey game, unfortunately, March 2nd, right? Or the first part. The Spash had lost just before that, unfortunately, to Chippewa Falls. Okay, so that was February, March, right? What is the parking lot going to serve from March until football season starts in the fall?
Fair question. Ultimately, it would be overflow parking if we had things like the dome still in full usage, primarily, or if we had things going on at PJ's that would still overflow. The only event after those dates in the Willet would be the ice show, which is basically a 2-day weekend. I'm just telling you what it is. It's 2 days. It's Friday, Saturday. That's just what I mentioned to you. The other thing I can tell you is most ice rinks, as they upgrade, try to keep ice 12 months of the year. We do not, and we're not advocating for it. But I can't tell you today that 30 years from now, the city might not do an improvement to the Willet, and it's most likely they would probably keep ice 12 months a year.
I didn't hear that last part. What was that?
I said currently ice is only in the Willet from September to April, but today's standards, most ice rinks, when they're renovated and they're built and constructed, they try to keep ice 12 months of the year, similar to the Ice Hawks Arena. So what I can say is today the city doesn't have the budget funding to do that, but I believe it's likely over the life of this building or a future changeover of this building that 12-month ice would probably be in the cards.
I've got more, but I'll let
Yeah, sounds good. Let's go here.
Speaking of ice rinks, the really wonderful, unique thing here is that we have, family can come and their 13-year-old can go play hockey in the hockey rink, and the rest of the little kids and us old people who want to skate in that can just like pucks and skate on the rink. So I really have a problem with eliminating that hockey rink. And I also think, aren't there ways like the downtown rink that was there for a while that you can put foundations under the rink so that the ice does last longer, even though we're not having as much cold weather?
Fair question. So yes, I can tell you that there's different levels of it, right? The city of Monona, for example, did a full chiller system outside on their Paris. Expensive but beautiful, right? And they use a whole full outdoor rink. If those were things that the community supported, they could be explored. In our history, we haven't done that, but it could be looked at. The short answer is, to your point though, if it was not hockey and this was ice skating, the skate rental and the staff there would be crucial because you'd have to have rules that you don't have hockey pucks going. That's one of the reasons, if you step back about 8 years ago when the city staffed it, our staff person was actually told, don't let hockey happen on the ice rink, so let somebody take one in the face. So yeah, I know, I hear you for sure. I'm just mentioning that's kind of the things that play a role. So in the end of this, as the feedback comes in, if the hockey rink ends up ranking to the top of, hey, we want that there, that's going to be the decision that Park Commission will make.
Another question, what's in the budget?
Yeah, great question. So what this dome is showing currently is it's showing what's called a super field. So imagine a turf field just like this one, slightly bigger, that has infields laid in the grass of the turf. So this little fence line that you see here is fence that can be moved. So let's play it out for example. Let's say Point Fast Pitch was going to hold 2 practices or games inside this. Their outfield fences would have a slight walking area between it, and they would be playing kitty corner to each other. Okay, so that would be like 2 youth activities for softball. If you took this fence out, the grass turf, you could actually bump the center field fence out deeper, and then a high school game could happen in it. That's kind of the idea, or a college game, but you couldn't play 2 at the same time. This could never be a big tournament facility because it's just not big enough in this location. In addition to that, though, you take those fences and you push them against the wall, and you'd have a full-size field if you wanted to have a bigger game, say a soccer game go on, a football game, or lacrosse. More often, our understanding of what facilities are happening is they're putting nets across them, and they're sectioning off, say, 30 yards by the width. This is shown at approximately 225 feet for width, and you'd have, say, 4 practices happening side by side. So maybe you could have 2 softball teams, male and female, and you could have 2 soccer teams, male and female, that are going on. So this is just a bare bones concept. Other things that typically are included in a structure like this is a hardscape around it, not necessarily a track, but to allow people that might go sit in a few the short bleachers on the edge to be able to get up alongside the building. And there's usually a net in front of the spectators. I will tell you, there's a full gamut of design that these facilities can be. This is really just a placeholder showing that large field could be underneath it, and you can make it flexible inside of it. This is an aired structure, meaning it's blown up, and that's why you have to have an airlock. It's so that you're not opening a door and losing the air pressure that's inside of it. These typically are climate controlled if you do a structure like this.
Yeah, could you repeat the questions when people...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Going back to the dome there, we called it a super field dome. I know that in some communities, they have the domes and there's tournaments like all weekend. I teach high school in the area here. I know a lot of my students go and they play tournaments all night long, midnight, 2 in the morning. What's the possibility that there are games and tournaments and things going on in the neighborhood at those times? You know, going back to somebody's question about lights.
Great question.
And stuff, because that's kind of a residential, nice, quiet neighborhood, and the increase in traffic whenever is a problem.
Great question. So the question was, what is the likelihood that events would go on late at night into the late hours, because tournaments happen at all different times? So our park hours are governed by 11 p.m. stop. The only ordinance exemption that exists is a special event. Think a concert, Riverfront Rendezvous, Riverfront Jazz Festival. Somebody does a special event in a shelter. Then we have an ordinance carved out where they can go till 1 in the morning with approval. That goes through our governing boards, so our Public Policy and General Government Committee, and that's publicly announced. So the short answer is the likelihood is it'd be ordinance prohibited for things that go on past 11 o'clock. But I have to be honest with you, right? That's an ordinance. So ordinances are like anything in the world. They can be reviewed. But that's a unilateral ordinance for the whole city. So ultimately, that's my understanding is it's never been changed in the city's history. The 11 o'clock is one of the original ordinances for the parks.
So people would have to be out by 11, but then lights stay on a while longer to get everybody safely out. So feasibly, lights and noise or whatnot could go on till 11:30, midnight, traffic.
If it was used till 11 o'clock, I think your understanding would not be inaccurate. I'm going to go, we're going to keep going for people that haven't given a question yet. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having us. You mentioned that the first domino to fall would be the the police department being override. But I was just wondering if you could speak about if that is a long-term solution of the police department, if there's temporary solutions, and is that the appeals fund there or do we want to expand them? And then also if I could add on to that, if you could also speak to why Pricing Street would be a better exit.
Chief Kuso, are you still in the room? Yeah. Do you mind coming up?
Yeah, she also has a question. She's with the Frisbee group.
Yeah, let's get that next. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I didn't know if you had any questions or things for us to share. I have to.
Okay. Is there something you wanted to share? This is okay. Is there any questions for the ultimate Frisbee side of the park plan? If not, thank you for attending. Certainly, this will be recorded. You can play it back. Okay. Thanks, Kate. Appreciate it. Okay. The question was talking about the police department in Goerke Park, what the long-term plans were if this is the best location for the police department, and then the second half of the question was why Price Street for the access?
Yeah, I believe this is going to be our location for a very long time. It took us a long time to get here in 2017. We made the facility our own. We bring in lots of training every single year now because it's an old technical college. The other thing is we're more centrally located, being over on this side, because obviously our growth is to the east side of the city. And talking about access points, anytime we can have more access points is great for law enforcement. With the school at 7 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, our officers, people aren't supposed to come through here until 4 o'clock, but they all come through here. If we have officers that have to respond, sometimes they get backed up here and they can't get out. They don't go out this way because of the school. And so sometimes our detectives, even if they go to a crisis call, they've got to wait and people aren't letting them in to back out of their squads, or back their squads up. Secondly, the events that are held in Goerke, it doesn't matter if it's 7 or 3. Obviously the hockey team's phenomenal. I mean, SPASH, UWSP, women's, men's. So this place is full at all times. If we can have another access point for entrance and exit, it would help us tremendously, because if we find out that this is full, we can actually leave this way, or we can actually have the school district or the Boys and Girls Club, if they decide to come this way, try to exit this way and leave this open for us at all times. It's just a better response for us. Yes?
Because it could potentially increase your response time, have you considered putting a pull in front of the police department on Michigan Avenue? Digging in, it would be less expensive and faster for police.
We've actually thought about putting a fence here from 7 to 4 and then opening up at 4 o'clock. We've talked about it. We haven't gotten the price on it. A lot of individuals, they'd be very upset. But I know a lot of people come in here and they actually use the facility as well in our parking lot, and the Boys and Girls Club uses it. But that is an alternative we could do, is we could actually put a gate here and have it closed at 7 and then open up at 4 o'clock for thoroughfares.
So that hasn't been considered yet?
We've talked about it, but it's all conceptual.
No, sorry, the Michigan Avenue possibility. For a pullout?
I don't. What are you talking about?
You'd be constructing a pullout that would basically expand the right-of-way into close to the police department building itself. And you'd have. It doesn't exist right now.
Are you talking here, Trevor?
Yeah, right in front of the building on Michigan Avenue itself.
So if we put a parking lot here?
Not necessarily a park, just a pull-out, kind of just south of there is the PJ's pull-out, drop-off. You could do the same exact thing for the police department.
Guess I'm a little confused. How would we get our?
I think I just want to paraphrase. Are you saying leave the cars outside, park, enter the building, come back? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean,
He's asking if you could
half of them are running,
yeah, if you
or
could park
some
the
are
cars
running
on the road
anyway.
outside, so you didn't have to have the other exit.
Old park right here.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying could the squads, if you had to pull in here, go on foot to the building, if they got called, get on the vehicle and go?
So yeah, this would be a parking lot then right here.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just more of a pull-in, just like to the south at PJ's, same
Kinda
kind of
like what
concept.
PJ's does here.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we never even considered that. But yeah, that's the option we could actually look at as well.
Okay.
Or even talking about making this a parking lot for us. At least we could get our squads there. We couldn't get all of our equipment, our MRAP and everything else, so we could probably get our squads there.
Sure.
Our 14 squads.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions specific for the chief?
I have one for the chief. Does the police department have separate funding available, such that if nothing happens in the park, you would still be able to fund the driveway up to Price Street, and/or part of the parking, and/or anything
No.
to facilitate your needs, independent of everything else?
Not right now.
Is that a consideration? Is that something that you would push for?
I would love to, but again, we've gotten a 0% operational budget for the last 5 years. In capital right now, we're focusing on electronics. I'm telling you right now, our radios, we just ordered 52 Motorola radios, $550,000. It's ridiculous. And so the budgets are super tight. But the only way we're going to get a garage is if we get the grant. It's a 75% grant. That's the only way we'll ever see a garage. I've been here for 28 years. Our squads have never been under shelter. Every other department in the entire city, all of their vehicles under shelter. Ours are used 24/7. When our officers come in, if there's a critical incident, 7 of our squads are gone. The officers that come in have to defrost their vehicles. It takes them about 30 minutes before they can actually respond. It's annoying. That's Trina.
Sorry to bring this up, but everybody knows who I am. I'm Trina Dorn, and I sat in a parking meeting, and I would really like you to help me on this one. Jackie Guthrie, your police officer, several of my neighbors that sat at that parking meeting, we were all made aware of why I'm doing what I'm doing, that an ambulance didn't make it through, that city resident ended up passing away.
I have never heard of that. And
Well,
I've
your
talked to
officer told me about it, and you and I have talked about it.
I've talked to Chief Moody and Chief Moody as well.
So
Okay.
let's just focus. Is there a question?
Right, but yes, my question is, since that was made up, I mean, I have residents that heard that announcement at that meeting that are here tonight. What are we going to do? We are already struggling as a community with the traffic, the overflow, bring it, pave it, they will come. It's scary if now things like that have already happened this fall, and now we want to do this.
So one thing that I'm just going to step in for a second. We have to be cognizant of, not the EMS side, but everything we're talking about in this park is currently happening minus this.
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that everyone's aware. We already have all the hockey games. We already have all the football games. We're already bursting at the seams. So this is a big component of addition. If that's not there or something changes, right, you're actually adding significant parking inventory off the street. So just as you think about this and you're talking about the impacts to the neighborhood, and I will tell you this again, talking about zoning code, we could not have done in 1933 today what we did. Say, park on this lawn. You can't do it. You can't do it in your yard. You can't park your car for 4 months on the lawn. So I'm just mentioning, though, in terms of uses, that's the relation, is that the parking would be added inventory off the street.
And again, I've not heard of that, but if that happened, I'm assuming you're saying that it was the parking on the road that caused that incident?
I believe
Again-
so. I'm Price
So
in
again, this is trying to
Minnesota.
bring people off the road into a parking lot, to free up the road. Again, I don't know if it happened.
Right, I agree with Trevor. Let's do that parking analysis because it's hundreds of people, so. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I've got one. Yeah. So first of all, let me just point out the yellow polka dotted line with the house that the city purchased. They purchased that house for $2,000 over assessed value. So if anybody doesn't know the difference between assessed value and appraised value, let me know, because $2,000 over assessed value is ridiculous. I could have sold that house to Mark for 300. What's the question? Chief, thank you for being here. You're a great guy, and I back the blue.
I'm going to add one comment on this to make sure. Hold on one second. That asking price, because this is public record, we were approached by that resident. We were given a price. The city discussed it in closed session because it's a negotiation. We did not haggle. We did not make an offer first. It was delivered to us just like any resident could. There was no shady business. There is 11 aldermen. You can ask about that process. It was handed to them. I gave them a sheet that I got from the resident. The offer was executed. I will also tell you that the woman that sold the house had a realtor advising her, and that is not a fair statement to say that the city just undercut something. So I want to set the record right.
I never said undercut anything.
Well, I just want to make sure
everybody know that it was $2,000 over the assessed value. And a lot of people don't know the difference between assessed and appraised value. So I just wanted to make that.
And the assessment was done a year previously. It was at 98%. So there's some key componentry. And there was a number of repairs necessary too. So there's a big piece of this I'm happy to discuss with anyone, and I want to make sure everybody understands the particular.
And I just want to make sure we understand assessed versus appraised. Chief, so in the event the house that the city owns gets bulldozed and that becomes a driveway, right? I live 4 doors down. What is that, and my mom lives 8 doors down. What does that look like on Price Street for police cars going on emergency calls down a 25-mile-an-hour road?
It wouldn't change a whole lot right now because sometimes we actually go to down Price. Right now, it's actually nice exiting here, or exiting right here. The thing that would help us tremendously, if we have another exit, if we have 30 cars coming this way, what we might have is 15 going this way and 15 going that way. I want to keep my officers coming out this way, then come down to Main Street or Clark, head to the east side, and then go to Main Street, go to the west side, and here they go north, and then go south.
But not east on Price Street, sorry to interrupt.
No, we try not to,
Yeah.
but this would just decrease the flow of traffic that comes through here. I think people that would come through here, I think it would prevent some, and it would make them come up on Price.
That's what, I've got little kids.
Yep.
What does that look like? Main Street.
I don't know if it's going to bring more traffic because a lot of people come out here and they turn on Price. A lot of the citizens, because they come over here, they come down, and go to Minnesota and exit onto Clark Street.
I had one more question about the dome structure. And certainly your graphics are clear and done very well, but has anyone done like a 3D vision? Because I'm trying to vision the WPA era charm and stone and Art Deco of the existing buildings, and then a giant white blob in the middle. It looks like it's more big than Solo and this photo. I don't see that fitting in. I guess that's not a question, it's a comment. I don't see it integrating into the neighborhood at all.
So the only way a 3D rendering would happen is if Park Commission. The question.
This is conceptual, right?
Yeah. So the
isn't.
question was, what would the dome look like? Has there been a 3D rendering in comparison and adjacent to WPA buildings? No. The reason not is it could come off the drawing, right? The Park Commission's going to discuss it. Only time 3D renderings have typically been ever produced is if something moves forward. We're so early on in this thing, and obviously that's a huge element that we need feedback on. And it's exactly right. If that ends up being taken out at the next conversation, there will be no rendering. So it's really conceptual. What do people think? And that'll allow the Park Commission members to choose.
Quick one, just on the dome. How does the size of this dome compare to the Hodag dome?
Small.
Okay. Second question about the driveway for the police department. I understand that, however, we're already dealing with the backup in traffic, as you know, anybody who deals with it, we know that it gets backed up. Giving people 2 choices for crowding up that back lot doesn't, what's going to be done for, you say maybe it'll only be 15 people. For those 15 people who are now going to use the driveway onto Price Street, where, we already have a certain amount of traffic because of Washington schools back and forth. Now we're going to dump more traffic onto Price Street, which is less equipped to handle it than Michigan is. So the question is, what's the...
Well, I think what we're trying to do is we're getting...
Can I restate the question? So just to make sure, the question was, looking at Price Street, are you saying, is the impact of Price Street, can it even handle the traffic load that would go onto it? Is that what you're, okay. That was the question, just make sure you heard.
I'm just gonna, the thing is doing these parking lots is trying to get cars off of Price. So the vehicles are there anyway. So if we get them into the parking lot, and then the only time that they're coming down this road is exiting instead of parking there all night before the games. So, again, for me, for law enforcement, the more access I have, it's a dream. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but it'll just help us. Trevor, I like his idea. We never looked at that. That's why we have these meetings. We can absolutely do that and have my officers walk in. That's not a problem at all. So, question.
It's been planned, thought out quite a bit. It's pretty tough. There's some things I like the school traffic, but I think there's a flaw in the planning. If you go back to current process slide, it says that your primary users the process started. Your primary users are school districts, UWSP, and Goerke. Well, I would contend that even above that, the primary users are the community. And it seems like they've been overlooked in this planning process that exists so far. So my recommendation would be to go back and put the community as the #1 priority.
So that, I didn't hear a question, but just so you know, to answer the question about user groups went first, now the community's weighing in. They are equally as important, and the community is a huge piece of this. And all of the feedback gained is going to go to the Park Commission members. I'm not saying that we couldn't have said, community, what do you want, right? I'm not saying that, but I can tell.
I'm not trying to argue a point, but I'm just trying to make a suggestion that the community needs to be first, and I don't see it in your plan. So my discussion with my neighbors and everything else and people in the community, there's a lot of little things about the whole plan that we'll never get to in question and answer tonight. And I know you've got it put off until whenever, but if the community had been first, I think those things would come out. And there's other planning processes that bring the community first. Sure. You know that from others.
I will also, though, yep, that's fair. I do want to tell you, though, the user groups are our community, right? They're our children, they're our families. So, and I want to also just mention, and this is a big distinction I haven't mentioned, this is a community park, not a neighborhood park. That's a designation. So I have to mention this, right? A neighborhood park service radius is about a 10-minute walk. The community parks is for the whole community, right? We have significant residents from across the whole city, 26,000, plus non-residents, school district that do come here. So I can't disagree. Could we have said, community, what do you want? Then went to user groups. It would have been reverse order, right? User groups would have said, well, if you would have asked us, we'd have told you it's not sized correctly. And then if the community said, well, you can't make it bigger. So no matter what, we need both sides at the table. That's where we're here. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're getting the feedback. And there's some big decisions to be made by our park commission as we move forward. And our common council. In the back.
My question is about the dome. So the dome seems like can attract a lot of people, not just from the Stevens Point or the cities, but from other cities. And with that much traffic, how can it benefit Stevens Point economically? In other words, have you considered other locations that when people come here to watch the game and they spend their money in the restaurants, they spend money in the local stores, so find a different location that people can go shopping easily. Than here, there's nothing close.
So the question was, have we looked at other locations? Can we find other locations? So our planning exercise is Goerke Park, should it go here or not? The truth is, if the park commission, the community says don't do it, it'll come off. And then the parks department alone is not looking for an enclosed recreation controlled space, right? We have a lot of user groups, and they all kind of conjoin here in Goerke and in Zenoff in our park system. But the truth of the matter is if it doesn't go into Goerke and it's not part of the plan, at that point, the city parks department is not at the table. The school district, the university, Boys and Girls Club, all of the other user groups certainly could look at other opportunities. The city could become re-engaged if we ever did do a different park and something moved forward where we were a partner. But we're really only gauging the community of, what do you think of this location? And if it's a resounding no, it'll come off. That's really where we're at. We're just trying to gauge, should it go here or not? Go ahead.
This is very micro, and I understand you're talking about a lot of big buildings and concepts, but I was curious with the differentiation between the pedestrian walkways and the vehicle walkways, is there a consideration for where bike lane could be on the north end and also on the south end for kids and adults?
Great question. We do have to incorporate not only the bicycle network, but also parking too. So because, again, conceptual, we've not drilled into it further. Based on our feedback, if there's changes, then we have to really drill in a little closer. But yeah, not only walking, we have to accommodate the bicycle traffic as well. This path is multi-use, kind of like it is today. It's asphalt. But as you see the way the sidewalks are, if this takes more shape and it starts to go a path one way or the other, then we have to drill into that some more as well. That's a fair question. Go ahead.
I know I talked back in the November meeting, maybe in February, about the barriers between if that becomes a driveway on Price Street and that parking lot. I know back in 2008, they talked about having 50 feet away from the residents, and also like none of the houses, we don't want the headlights into our backyard, and I don't know how many are going to do that, but even driving up and down that street, or in that area, driveway, going to Price Street or going into the parking lot, there's two houses that are right there. And how is that going to, how are you going to consider it? There's got to be some.
Sure. I just made a note. I think to answer that appropriately, I'd have to probably come back and talk with Rutler Corporation again if it does move forward, if something like that takes shape. So I could probably assess, or we could assess what the options are. Today, I don't know exactly how that would look. We're trying to, at this point, I think we're trying to determine, will it go or will these parts be included? If they are, I did make a note. We'll certainly try to incorporate that to be able to give an answer more specifically if it goes that way. That's a fair point. I wasn't part of that back then, so I didn't know exactly where it laid out. But knowing it now, we certainly can look into it.
How tall is that dome?
Great question. It ranges is the short answer. Okay, so what I'm told is if you actually design it, the width and the length, there's a range and a minimum and a maximum, and you can adjust it. The higher, the less efficient it gets. The lower, the more economical it can be. My understanding, though, is something like this it would be like 40 feet or higher, right? They're not 20 feet. So, but they can be higher than that too. They can go to 60, 70. But usually what they look at is the width and the height. The lower the ceiling, if obviously a ball gets hit, the more conflicts you have. So my understanding of it, not designing it, just placing it, it could be 50, 60 feet.
So on the order of the height of PJ is about 45 feet. Follow-up question with that. Has anyone thought about the light glinting off of that white dome into those classrooms? Because as someone who experienced that down at UW for most of my college career, it wasn't pleasant. The whole afternoon we had light glinting in off of the similarly situated dome. All of those east-facing classrooms the whole afternoon do the same thing. And we had a harder time learning than Mr. Mills than I did today.
You know which facility is that?
Which one?
Which one was it?
Down at UW, the engineering hall. It was a south base and
We can-
a little bit lower angle.
We have not looked into it, but I think it'd be great for us to double check it too, just to see what they've experienced, if they've made modifications. At this point, we've not examined, what the light glare would be here. The other thing too. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can. The other thing that we haven't looked at is it doesn't have to be white either. These domes can be other colors. We haven't gotten into any of that. White has been the most common due to the glare and stuff like that, or the sun hitting the white stuff. But my understanding is there is other options other than white if a facility like that would go forward. Go ahead.
Okay, it would have helped a lot if you had a microphone. If you would have passed it around, That would help a lot. We could hear. Now, the first question to answer after you get this answer from the crowd is, how many of you are here, first of all, to try and maintain and save the ice rink, that little piece of grass that's over there? How many are here for that?
And the boarding house.
All right, so we've got a lot of people who are concerned about the history and the fact that we'd like to preserve part of Stevens Point that's been here for 70-some years. So what I want you to do and answer this question, will you go back to your committee, go back to page 1, your first draft, and you can work on that one, but work on the first one. Give us an alternative, and then tell us about the money. Because our economy right now, we're suffering with whether or not we're going to have Social Security, whether or not we're going to have health care, whether or not we're going to have a public school which may be privatized. All those things are issues that nobody's talking about. But it comes down to money, and follow the money. So you've got to be able to tell us what it's going to cost us. Give us an option. Go back to that first one, and then take a look at what are the priorities. Number one, you looked at the police department. When they moved in, there were other parts of that building that are occupied by somebody else. They kicked them out. That's good, because they want to finish off keeping that building. Take care of them. Take care of the parts. Take care of the necessity parts first. Do that. Get the money there. And then go back to this. But watch what's happening this next year, whether or not we're going to be able to afford this.
Thank you for your thoughts. Yeah, but
Yeah, so the concern as I'm sorry, I can't think of so hearing somebody right behind me. So as a historical society, we're really concerned about the historic preservation issues here. The county council, like what, the last few months passed a historic preservation plan, and right out the gate is demolished 2 historic buildings. And so there's some concerns there. My question has to do with, one, why, if the armory, which is over 100 years old now, and is super historic to our and it's not as visible because it's off on Michigan, out on Clark Street, why aren't you pursuing the historic designation on that? Because it's actually a historic preservation success story right now in adaptive reuse. The city is using it and maintaining the structure to keep the spirit of our past alive so we can use it for the future. Because there are stories within that building. The second is, you said that the warming house is not eligible for historic designation. I just want to know what historian told you that.
no, it's not on the eligibility list currently.
Okay, it's not, so if the research was put into it, we could make it register available. If like, because it's not like there's like a list
Not
of like.
disqualified, correct.
Right.
If I
so you're not,
misspoke,
like,
yeah.
okay, because that's what it made it seem like, is like this building just has no historic significance.
I don't want, if I misspoke,
When in fact, like, there is a story behind that building and why it's there in the first place.
if I misspoke, I'm sorry. So what I meant is that it's not on the local eligibility list. It's not on a historic preservation list. It's not that you can't, right? There's processes for all of that. So if I misspoke, I apologize. Their first question about preservation, it's a complicated question. What I can tell you is we are preserving it and actively using it. And if we do not build a garage for the police department, I hope my office and my forestry department occupies it forever, okay? Truth is, we want to stay in Goerke Park.
But that's not, the armory section of the building is actually what you would be going to Boys and Girls Club. Like the front part of it. So then it gets into another, like, I don't know, I'm in a nonprofit, where's, you know, are you giving it to them? Like, how does that work?
No, it's a delicate balance for the city council when you have a tremendous amount of children that benefit from the operations of the Boys and Girls Club. And then you have to compare that to if you have a building that is really aged and is involved with quite a bit of capital outlay to keep it up. And if the city does find a campus for their facility, and the Boys and Girls Club comes to the city, and I don't speak for the council or the Boys and Girls Club, but says we can serve 200 more youth, that's not as easy of a decision to just flat out say, heck no, okay? So the best way I can phrase it is that we're trying to balance the demands of entities in the park, pay tribute to the historic value of the things that are getting used heavily, and not just say we're ignoring it and leaving everything, right? So the short answer is, can it be preserved? Yes. If our community speaks to the park commission, speaks to the alders, fills the survey out, says save it, it'll be saved, right? But it's a couple layers. There's usage demands, there's underutilization if we move, and that is not as just quite as simple as saying, well, we would never do something else. That's the best answer I can answer. I'd love to talk to you some more if I could offline. Anybody else that hasn't answered a question? Go ahead.
Sorry, I see people are asking multiple. I have a question, a big one. You keep going back to the survey. I keep heating messages, Facebook, text, calls, knocking on 75 doors yesterday. People that are wanting to save the warming house, the hockey rink, the open ice skating rink. There's nothing on there, and the baseball fields, softball fields. There's nothing to click. So people are clicking the only box that you have available that says rink green space. They don't know. I mean, I'm not saying all of them are. Some have said, oh, I filled it out, da da da. Why? I know pretty much who created the survey. The board never saw the survey. I'm a little frustrated with the survey because I personally can't tell my community members and 500 people I have on my page now how to fill out a survey because it's so biased. What's your answer to that, please, sir?
This survey, when it was designed by my department, and I was heavily involved with that as the director, left 2 open-ended questions on the bottom to allow it to be said what is not included. Please let me finish. Please let me finish. To fill out the question to say if they wanted things included that were not included. We had a lengthy conversation about, do you click buttons for all the existing features? There's a lot of them, right? This was the best comprehensive tool we thought we could put mathematics on. 500 surveys are filled out. 100 of them supported the dome. 400 did not. 500 surveys were filled out. The Parker building is mentioned 89 times or 182 times. We did not pay a consultant. Cities get labeled often with wasting money on consultants, so we took it in-house. I have not heard from one phone call as an official city representative that the survey is confusing. So I would love if you would direct those that, just hear me out, those that contact you to please contact my office so we can work through it with them, because the difficulty is if people not affiliated with the organization are answering questions on behalf of the city, it is not the full truth of what's happening. So I apologize that people experience that. Please have them contact me.
I've done so, and it took you a week to reply, and it took Jackie Guthrie to send a message, hey, people are messaging you, and you didn't reply, I get you were on vacation. But if you're basing everything on a survey, that's not fair.
I apologize that I was on vacation for a week. I did respond on a Sunday evening to the email you're referencing, and if anybody would like to contact me at my office, I'll give them a direct line. Yes, I have a 2-year-old, and we went east, and we had a good time. So, yeah, public service is a difficult job, okay? But we have to take time away, and I'm not going to apologize for that. So, next question. Go ahead.
In the beginning, you had said that any activities that go on in the park today are being accounted for in your new diagram. There is the outdoor hockey rink, and you have 2 boys that take their friends there from other cities too that enjoy the hockey rink and playing on the hockey rink. You don't have hockey rinks on there. In KP, if I've done there, they have 1 hour on a Sunday open for hockey. That's not enough time, and kids love it. So that needs to be accommodated.
Agreed. So the question was, hockey rink is not on the drawing, and it was said earlier, I had said we're trying not to accommodate our current groups or user groups. Yes, so what the thought process is so far is if the plan moves forward and doesn't contain a hockey rink in Goerke, it needs to be placed in the park system. It could go back in here just as much as it could go out. But right now the idea is that hockey outdoors would not be taken away. It would just have to be relocated before it would ever be deconstructed here.
What are your thoughts for where it could be relocated?
The 2 locations at a high level that have been talked about were Iverson, if it could work, because we have a warming house there and we have other winter activities and we send staff there on weekends already to groom the hill and do other amenities. Otherwise, as housing is developing to the east, there's talk of a new community park. And for a lot of things, pickleball, baseball diamonds, as well as could hockey go there. If it's a community park on the east side, we need bathrooms, we need parking. Community parks require that type of amenity.
Would the hockey rink existing today be taken away before another facility is needed?
Our plan is no. But ultimately, because we're still several months away, again, a lot of these components might take years to come to fruition. Fair question.
I'm going to stand up. So, I'm Hassan. But has there been any look into as far as who uses it? Because I'm talking about the ice rink. Because I get that it's a community park, but at the same time, it kind of is a neighborhood park. I know, well, I don't know them, but I have met many of the college students who go to UWSB who walk there to go ski. I don't think they want to walk to Iverson. I don't think they want to walk out east. It's right by the university. This is something that should stay there.
Since I was intimately involved with Ceramore Park, at one point there was talk of ice skating on the east side of Ceramore Park, which would certainly be a solution for recreational ice skating. And I would support that.
The comment was that Pat had said he was involved with the Ceramore Park project, former Emerson site, and he said that that could be a location potentially for, were you saying hockey skating, Pat, is that what you're getting at, or ice skating? Either. And he just said that he would support that. Anybody new? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I thought you were referencing that this is walkable.
Has there been any look and where do they go?
I apologize, I didn't glass over it. So, my understanding, reading surveys, and also obviously just being around the park when we have winter activities going on, we see lots of non-resident and resident usage. Heavy student population that certainly goes here. There's also quite a bit of pickup hockey. Say the hockey team is practicing, that they go out sometimes and use it as well. So there's no doubt that the rink is used. We're not actually debating that whatsoever. Really, the thing that as a park administrator I'm weighing and the park commission is going to lay out is 25,000 square feet, if we can only get the type of usage we're getting in timeline, more valuable to more of the outside activities or the aquatic center, these other improvements. It's not decided yet, but that's a real tangible thing we have to balance as we work through it.
Well, my main concern stems from those who can't drive, because students come in from all over the planet. Could it be looked at to, out in Colorado, there is an ice rink that they put in an insert that allows the rink to be used in the summer for roller hockey. Could the city look at that as an option?
Yes.
Firstly, I want to say thank you. This is the first time the public has been engaged to this extent, and it's immediately clear to me, at least, that addressing people's concerns is top of mind, and that shows. So thank you for all the work and thought you've put into that, and for addressing my questions, because I've already had a few for you. One more that's kind of coming down to me from constituents is that there is a little concern that there is a private citizen who is not appointed or elected and not city staff being listed as a co-chair on this project. So ultimately, I understand as a member of the board, Parks Board and Council will have voting authority to approve the plan. Could you clarify what Mr. Shields' role will be? Will he have decision-making authority ultimately in the version of the plan that comes to the board?
So earlier on, and I'm not sure if you might have been late, but Tim is a co-chair in a volunteer capacity. So the question was, is Mr. Sherrill, what's his role in this planning process? So two things. I've only lived in Stevens Point for 6 years, okay? I'm originally an Auburndale native, worked in Portage and at Schwabenheim before that. So I don't know as many locals in the city or people that have lived here as long. Tim has been a lifelong resident and obviously raised children here. So I will tell you, Tim has advised me a number of times of, hey, that's Billy Brown, or that's Sue, you should talk to that person for this type of feedback. So that's kind of the first role he has played as a co-chair, is he's been involved with a lot of the organizations. Secondly, and I won't skin this any differently, the council has required significant fundraising for a number of projects in the park system, and Tim has graciously volunteered on those projects in the past to say, hey, Dan, I'm willing to free the time up, no charge, I'll go with you to make those asks. And I couldn't have done that type of fundraising for this project, which was $5 million, back when Tom Schrader was here, which was I think a 2.5. He was really influential in that process as well. I'll also tell you that Tim used a lot of these facilities. My children are young yet, so I've not gotten out with actual as a spectator of my own children. So he's given some guidance or talked about different things that they experienced. And then as we've gone along and talked to different user groups, again, oftentimes there's been a connection because he's worked with those boards. So his role is volunteer. He gives some advice once in a while to me, and he's come along in the planning meetings to weigh in. He has no vote, and he really has no say in what goes into this plan. He certainly can give recommendations, and I'm not going to say that he hasn't made recommendations to me, absolutely. Tim also plays a role with some of the other institutions, with like the school district once in a while for some of the things that they do, the university, those type of elements. And because there's so much overlap with some of these projects, he's a pretty large, he's a really good conduit between those elements in those situations. So ultimately his end goal here, and if I skimmed over it, it was my fault. He said once we support a project and we have the master plans that the community supports, he has expressed interest in helping aid with some of that fundraising again. But ultimately what the drawing ends up being, what the plans are, is 100% in the realm of our electeds, which is our park commission and council. So very fair question. Go ahead, I think you asked a question.
Dan, it's kind of a dual question. Thanks for going back to that. So the dome itself needs to be operated 12 months out of the year to be fiscally feasible. I mean, financially feasible, right?
That's my understanding. We've not run a model, but to take one down, they say it's a multi-week process and usually several $1,000s. So most communities do leave them out.
Okay, so then we will have the aquatic center and the dome running at the same time for parking?
Yes, in the same.
Okay, then thank you. Then you and Tim did a lot of research on the dome and came up with a figure of about 400,000 to 500,000 more people just for the dome coming through a year, right?
No.
Interesting.
No, we've actually done no math on what would go underneath that. So if I'm not to tell you honestly, I have no figures of what would draw to it. Here's the big question that would factor into that final evaluation. Let's say Point Fast Pitch moved to Xenoff permanently and they played at 2 diamonds out there. There's significant traffic that they have that wouldn't be underneath that location, but the reverse is true too. If the high school, for example, and the college and maybe our youth groups begin to use it, we'd have to get their numbers as well. So ultimately, if it comes off the drawing, we won't do any of those figures. If it moves forward, we'd have to dig into that more. But to my knowledge, I've not seen anything related to occupancy numbers. I've not been involved.
But okay. I'm sticking with that, huh?
Yeah, I am. Go ahead.
Number one, I want to commend the Parks Department for basically trying to keep everything central in the city. This is a great thing. The thing is that you're trying to pack too much in this small space. And you are, you realize that. And it's seasonal too. We've got a pool that's seasonal. We got a hockey rink that's seasonal. We got ball diamonds that are seasonal. So I commend you for doing the best you can. We understand that it's not all going to fit there. And Server Park is a great idea because there is room there on the east side. And I'm glad Parks Department is actually listening and looking. I commend you. Thank you.
Question going back to the survey. I think this is a great thing to fill out because it's asking us to check off those things we would like to see and those things we wouldn't support and then the open spaces. So my question is that the map, whatever, has 28 potential items. On the survey, we're missing like numbers 20, 23 to 27. Is there a reason that those things would only go in if certain things got placed in there? And so I know like the water runoff, the paving and that.
Great question. So the question was that there's some things like the stormwater retention and other elements that are not in the survey, but they're on the drawing. You're 100% right. If the parking lots come out, then there's a lot different mathematical calculations on stormwater. If they move forward, some of those are required. You have to have them. And it's a complicated formula based on the final design, so that was why they weren't on there. But for example, if say 2 of the plots come out of the next drawing, then a lot of that actually can go away.
Okay, and then I have a second follow-up. So, and I don't know if you're able to answer this or not, but on Goerke Park and the main entrance there right now in Minnesota, there's that new arch that was built.
Yes.
Is there something going to go in where the cement blocks are in the middle of that? Or
Yep.
I'm kind of been curious.
Great question. So the question is the entrance arch on the east side of the stadium. Yes, the donors for the project that pledged to the field. Part of the agreement was to recognize them, similar to what we get like the Saramer Park project. So the squares is where they're going to go. Truth be told, why it didn't get finished is we're trying to finish the press box. And at one time we thought someone might put naming rights on it. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. So then we'll be able to finish that. Yep, great question. Yeah. It doesn't look right the way it is. Yep. Absolutely. Go ahead.
So my question is, because there's a price to all these things, especially as neighbors living right around this, so you'll be paying something. So I want to know what kind of financial gain will come from this? What kind of finances come from Goerke now, and how much more will come if this happens?
Yeah, great question. So also a large answer, okay? So the city general levy taxes are spread out within the city's budget, right? So our city, don't hold me to these numbers, but we have about a $26 million operational budget, okay? So all of your property taxes that get paid, there's a segment of that to the tune of about $2.5 million that comes to my department, okay? That budget is what we use primarily for salaries. If you look at a city budget to the upwards of the upper 80%, you're talking about salaries for all employees, but that budget's what we utilize to maintain these facilities, mow the grass, put the staff in them, do all those different things. We do collect small revenue from the user groups. So Point Fast Pitch, for example, pays 10% of their concession sales back, and that's to help offset a small fraction of the labor hours that go into this facility. Same thing with the other groups that have concessions in other locations. We charge, if you get to the nuts and bolts of it, contractual labor to, or contractual amounts to the school districts. They sign 15-year pledges. I'm going to get this number wrong, but I believe, like, for example, it's 60,000-ish of the school district that pays to operational budget to help run this facility. Then they have a capital pledge to pay back the debt on this facility, right? So the long and the short of it is, revenue we collect is, like on this side with these big capital upgrades, this model was built on what are the expenses to build it, and it was divvied up with pledges by the user groups to borrow and build it. But then there's operating expenses that go with it too, and those groups stepped up as our partners and signed 15-year pledges to subsidize and pay for the operations too. That's one project in the park. If you step out into the park system or Goerke as a whole, the truth is your taxes subsidize quality of life, right? So the pool operates at a $100,000 a year deficit, okay? So we budget expenses, we budget revenues, but so far council has said we want the outdoor recreation for our community. So we have not upped daily fees. Our park commission has stood behind saying, hey, we want it to only be $3 so kids can get into it. So we know we're going to lose about $100,000 a year on a full season. That is not uncommon. If you look at other pool facilities across the state, because pools are so expensive to run with aquatic or the chemicals and the lifeguarding staffing, you have to almost lose money without having large contributors of contractual, people coming over for swim lessons, things of that nature. And then if you get into different elements of it too, right? Youth football, for example, they pledge to this project, but they use all the fields in the park. They're not charged for that. Because they're a partner of this, they get to use those fields because they're our kids and their families are obviously paying taxes. So Park Rec and Forestry has a fee schedule, and we charge fees to help offset not raising more taxes to cover all our expenses. But there's no way to skin it. If you look at your taxes, there's a part of it that goes to our department. And ultimately, quality of life, because it's not EMS services, it's not drinking water, I would argue it's an essential service. But the truth of it is, some cities don't have it. Some cities say we're not doing that. Stevens Point, for 60-plus years, has always had that department. So a fraction has always gone into subsidize quality of life issues. The budget's available on the website, so if you ever wanted to see each layer of the different elements and how things are budgeted for field services, what kind of revenues we collect, all viewable on the city website underneath our finance tab.
So that's answering my question about current.
Yep.
But how do you see this with future?
There's a couple ways.
Loss?
Yep.
As much, more, less?
So let's play an example out. Let's say the city gets a $9 million grant for this garage. The city council, if they accept it, would have to come up with about 2.5 to 3 million. 6 would be coming from the federal government, right? So that would either need to come from our capital budget, which we do borrow 7 million-ish or so a year in a current alignment, or they could look at going into reserve budgets, which is sometimes done, or they could look at a fundraiser of some sort, right? But let's say that's built. This component, again, I don't speak for this organization, but if the city said we would allow the land to be built, they could partner with the city and the other groups, and we could try to do something collaboratively, or perhaps if they were interested, and I don't know this for sure, but they could lead their own fundraiser with their own membership to build something, right? And the list goes on. Let's say this parking lot and this drop-off gets situated, but the city says, hey, as the tax base, right, school district has a larger tax base, non-residents included of the city of Stevens Point. I don't speak for the council. This is just theory here again, right? But the city could say, hey, this is our land. We want to work with you. We're not able to do a big project together, but we would allow you to do these improvements if and when you could afford it, right? So there's this whole model where the individual entities could look at the different components, and again, over time periods, different projects could move forward. So that's one option. Another option is if all of the partners come together and they say, we want to do something larger and more transformational, then you can get into larger fundraising opportunities. You can talk about other things, what would the community support. But really, before we get to that component, we have to determine what we're building and how we're building or where it would go. And then based on timelines, that's where we would know, where it could be sequenced and what the funding model would be.
Has the Parks Department or the Department of Public Works done a flood risk assessment or a heat island effect assessment? Okay, related to that, are the Parks Board, the Parks Commission, your department, and Rattler aware that the zoning code was just approved to be rewritten in February?
Yes.
Okay, so to your points earlier, the parking doesn't have to look that way. The mandates could change drastically, and you could actually go back to grass if you wanted to. It all depends on how this new zoning code is rewritten. So I think it's important to understand we're going to have more flexibility than what's presented here. I am very concerned about that much pavement. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Yeah, I just had a quick question related to that. I was just curious, you mentioned that there are requirements when you make building adjustments to trigger the need for the paved parking area. I'm just curious what the threshold is where, if you're making changes in this park, where that would trigger that and require that you have a paved parking area.
So our zoning administrators who reviews the plans for us, so I couldn't give you the exact math, but this is the way I understand it to work, is that when you have occupancy on a facility, like how many people are in it, they have a mathematical formula in our chapter of ordinances of what you have to have for parking stalls. Again, because this is conceptual, right, we're giving our best guess, but if we find out, if the community after their gauge says, yes, let's do an aquatic center, we like the 50,000 square foot, then we'll get the formal layout of what their number would be based off of a design of the pool. Because as you can imagine, the amenities in this pool will determine the occupancy of the pool, which really then determines the parking. So again, on the concept, when you're not into design documents, some of it is best guess. Is that a fair assessment, Ross? It's best guess based on the occupancy it could be, and then we have to drill it down. And to your point, Trevor, you're right. If regulations change, the good news would be, most likely, the magnitude of these changes would be probably long after that, hopefully would be done. I'm sorry, I'm talking about.
That's right, no. So to go off the parking again, where the one by Michigan and Maine. Yes, and then by where the pool is, on the south side of the field. There, years and years ago, the trees were planted to grow. What will happen to those trees?
Typically, when we've looked at some sort of reconstruction of like a lot or that, or a lot or a different area, what we'll try to do first and foremost is see if a tree bank could go in and how it conflicts with what's on the site. So getting into the design question, let's say that we contracted with Rattler Corporation, said we're doing a parking lot. They would do a topographical study first. So they actually go out, they mark the size of the tree, and they place it on their GIS maps. And then ultimately what we tell them all the time is, can we lay out the islands or the medians around those items? So the truth is, right, a lot of that magnitude would have impact, but like this is kind of plunked off of a schematic they have as kind of a concept. So we'd have to try to, what would happen with design if it got to that point, if things got approved, is the site would start to be laid out based on the actual topo data on the site. That's not where we are today. They're just looking at spatial size.
Right. I just have concern because years and years ago when Chuck Mason and such had that in their plan to basically hide the field so that there was, when you're, for the field goals and stuff, that was part of seeing it and not seeing the roads and the houses. It was part of
like being that it is a park. That was their idea behind it. So, and I just read one other question to go up the entranceway on Michigan, or excuse me, Minnesota. I think it's 24 was the other entrance. Would that be the new, like, grand entrance, or will the other one still be the home entrance?
So both are our main entrance to the stadium. Are you talking here?
Yes.
Okay, so when we did the Goerke Stadium upgrade, our long-term plan is to have an arch on both sides, kind of so that basically from a football aesthetic that you're kind of walking through the same side. But no, this entrance would never go away over here, right? But to your point, if you do have, say, this parking lot, you're going to have probably people that will walk this down and come in this direction. Sure. So there would be still people coming through the west.
I just wanted to make sure the other one wasn't going away.
No, sure.
Thank you.
So when I look at this at the end of the day, I see, when I look outside, 4 fields, and now we're looking at 1 field, and it going all to parking. You talk about busing as far as the school. Has there been any thought about busing from the different parking lots that the city has around the city to use those and bus to the events?
Not at this time.
Not at this time.
This is probably hardly naive of me to ask, but I just have to. I don't know anything about engineering. Can an outdoor hockey rink go on top of the tennis courts or, God forbid, the football field?
The turf field. The turf field, you mean, right? Is that what you're talking about? This football field? Okay. Yep. Great. Great question. So we did actually talk about could it go in a parking lot or the tennis courts. This is our understanding is that when you flood those rinks, if you have any sort of crack or break in the surface underneath it, when you flood on top of it, the freeze thaw, you're going to make it 10 times worse quicker. So the tennis courts would break up a lot faster, and the hardscape of the parking lot would too, because as you know, in Wisconsin, things settle. So most of the time they don't freeze and thaw on top of that or add water to try to not have that go down quicker. Our understanding too, looking at the football field, we did not examine this closely, but there's crumb in the turf. So essentially what makes the grass in a turf field last the longest is it's standing up correctly with the correct infill. If you would start dumping water in and compacting that surface, it takes it longer to freeze out, and the sun essentially is really harmful on that grass laying over and being compacted. We actually every week fluff the crumb underneath it to keep it so it has the correct, I'm going to get it wrong, G-force for concussions, G-max, I'm sorry, the G-max testing. So I'm not familiar with anyone flooding a turf field. We haven't been able to find that, and it's really related to trying to keep the underground of the.
Yeah, real quick on that. That football, when we built that football field back in 2007, one of the biggest issues is a football field is crowned, okay, typically a grass field. So it goes like this. The reason that's important is for drainage. When you build, we put the turf on it, okay, the reason it is 6 inches crowned really has no logical reason other than football players, the quarterbacks, when they're throwing to the outside on either side are used to a crown field. So you keep it consistent. So the answer is it's not flat. You can't put a hockey rink on it. It's crowned. It's 6 inches up. And it's going to avoid the warranty. Those are the two, I'm just telling you, those are the 2 things. We looked at it, we talked about it. It's 6 inches wrong and avoid the warranty, which is $800,000.
So you opened by talking about the report, the comprehensive plan. Is that mandatory? How does that fit into this?
Not mandatory. So essentially, if we would just not do one, right? Basically, we would not be grant eligible. And so if we applied for any sort of, basically the biggest pots of money are the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund, the Recreational Trails Program Fund, and then we also use that document for our TAP grant that we got for the Plover River Crossing. Basically, it shows that the city doesn't create a program to get a grant, right? They want those documents on file so that when you go to apply, this is the background. It's to say, oh, you didn't just dream something up to take our money. You guys had something in the works. So the short answer is, if we chose to say, hey, we're not doing another one, we're just going to extend this one, we can, or we can let it slide.
But if you were to ignore something in this way, the city should continue to protect, preserve, and enhance existing works in progress, administration buildings, and other structures. Back to the point.
Yeah, essentially, right? Like, so would we score less on a grant if one of the buildings wasn't saved? I can't answer that. I would assume if the grant was scoring you points on historic preservation, you would score less, right? If the grant was more related to the amenity you're applying for, so land acquisition, aquatic center, something like that, I don't know if the building would be differently. The way I've only filled out and been successful on 2 of those type of grants, there's a point for every question. So it'll say something like, do you impact natural resources and develop it? You don't get that point if you do, right? Are you improving waterways? You get a point if you get that. Is this adding more opportunities that don't exist before? You get a point for that. You get a point if it's in a corp document. And then they score them all, and the score at the end is how they rank them against each other. So I think the answer to that, I hate to say both sides of my mouth, but it's yes and no, depending on how we do it.
I guess it's just confusing to me that the stated position of the city in this document and others is historic preservation is important to us, and then here we are knocking down one, tightening another.
Fair point, but we aren't yet. Our park commission is still evaluating it. That's a really big key here. It's still being evaluated. Okay.
I'm going to see if I can say this correctly, because I'm trying to articulate many questions at once. But for most of us that live in District 2, I think we were just all extremely surprised by it. I get that you guys, had put it out in other venues and stuff, but a lot of us were very surprised, even though it's, I understand now that it's in a very early stage and all that. I think that maybe something that could be tweaked on the survey, or maybe when you guys are promoting it on Facebook for people to fill it out, because I get that it's also a community park versus just a neighborhood park, but obviously those of us who live really close, we really see how it functions. So if this is exactly about Goerke Park only, and we're filling this survey out just about Goerke Park, I think something that might help is like a lot of moms will be like, heck yes, I want a water park, I want this, I want that, but they just want that in the city, where I think a lot of people would be also open to it being somewhere else. Because I think a lot of these, like what the guy had said earlier, we do want a lot of these things, they're great, but to put them in this historical location, it's a lot of stuff, it's too much in the spot where we're already maxed out. And a lot of us that live right here really get it, where the rest of the community is not really gonna get that, and then they're not gonna voice that in the survey, obviously, because they don't really understand. So I don't know if there's like something else we could add to the survey, or like if there's ever a extra consideration, where I think that's why a lot of us District 2 people are very worked up, because again, we felt blindsided, and it's fun to live in this neighborhood, but we also really all know the inner workings of how the park functions too. Like my house, I can specifically see the ice rink every night, and so maybe they're not renting, or maybe a number of how many skates are getting rented every night, but like I see the kids there till the lights are going off, and all these kids are just going over and skating every night. Like we see the usage of it, and we know, we're taking our kids over there all the time and stuff. So there's just a lot of those like idiosyncrasies that we know, good and bad, of living by Goerke Park, which I think we all would just really want to be heard about that.
It's a great point. And I will also say the survey is not it too, so I would encourage you all, those that are available, please attend the Park Commission, because when it's a formal Park Commission meeting, you'll be able to come right to the podium. They do limit the time just because of pure number of volumes, but it'd be great to hear the perspective of, hey, we live across the street, this is what we're seeing. You also don't have to wait till then. You can send an email, or you can contact us Park Commission members too. You can send it to me. There's no harm in it.
Yeah, because I think a lot of us would really like a lot of this stuff, but we're all just like, hey, maybe in this location, and I didn't come to the Xenoff meeting, so I don't know if there's any talk of the dome going over there, or the dome.
There has been so far.
Okay, because I think that's something that maybe the community, if this is all coming out lots of words at once, but if people knew that it could possibly be somewhere else someday, maybe more people would be on board with helping preserve the historic nature of Goerke Park too.
So my daughter goes to PJ's, and I had a nice chance to meet with principal and director of secondary ed here, and the vice principal. Definitely grateful for their time. And I agree that the separation of the drivers and the buses makes a lot of sense. What I want to understand is, why aren't we talking about funding, visioning, and spending money on kids that walk and bike? Has not been discussed. They are the most vulnerable users, and it's not part of this plan. And I want to understand why.
The question was, we're spending a lot of time planning. And there's a lot of talk about the improvements, the road network, the parking lot, and there's not been any talk of the pedestrian network, foot traffic, bicycle traffic. Where we're at in the concept planning phase, there's big decisions that have to be made about where things get placed right now, right? Or if they come out all entirely. So when we start to drill down, it doesn't, in our opinion, my opinion, where we're at in this process is, it's pretty difficult to say this is exactly where this trail will sit if that dome is off in a month. If the parking lot goes 50% in a month, right? When we get to that point, we certainly have to address it. And that's why this is a long process, right? Like June of 2024, lots of meetings have happened. These meetings are happening. More and more people are learning of it. And again, the first thing I can tell you is the Parks Department does not want a park that the community does not support, right? Like my job is way harder if people say, you're nuts, you built this park and you shouldn't be here, right? Like my job is to, as much as we appreciate the school relationship, we appreciate the university, we appreciate the Boys and Girls Club, I represent the taxpayers and I work for our tax base, right, what we do. So at the end of the day here, I have to make recommendations based on the feedback that comes in, and I will tell you, we're not going to ignore it. The reason we talked about that trail to nowhere, Trevor, if I'm being honest with you, I actually told Ross this. I said, during the meeting, Trevor brought up, he's like, hey, that trail goes nowhere. I said, we should start building onto that way early on. So we hear you, we certainly will address it, but if we have to change a bunch of things, we still have to Park Commission has to give me some firm direction here over the next really 60, 90 days so we can start to move it a little further along.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what might help the presentation is to begin with why is this worth doing in the first place? And what will be the benefits to the people, to Stevens Point itself. As Redwood Corporation can tell you, because they work on these projects all over the state, these things have economic impact that is sometimes profound. So I think some of those things might also just kind of put a little bit more color to the presentation. I can tell you, because I was a volunteer on the Cerebral Park project, and one of the unexpected benefits was the property value around the park. We've been told it's been going up, and realtors are using the proximity of the park in the sales of homes in that area, just as an example. So it stabilized the area in a really neat way.
I'm just concerned that we're not thinking about the aesthetic change to the neighborhood and the hallmark feel of it. I mean, if you take away the outdoor ice skating rink and the old-fashioned, I'll call it, building, when you drive by and you see people outside playing, it's nostalgia. And we lose that. And I'm afraid that's going to affect, the whole complex might affect the whole feel of the neighborhood. No, this is a community project. It's the neighborhood that's being directly impacted. And I think we should address that as well.
On that same line, aren't you getting the feeling that people in the neighborhood really don't want this magnificent change? I mean, maybe some of the things need to be tweaked and things need to be fixed and addressed, like traffic issues, but to change the total character of Goerke Park, which is so beautiful, next to PJ's and all of that, and the whole field, I mean, the people are telling you that right now, I think. Not everybody.
Just hang in here. Trust me on this. I'm pulled in a lot of directions. I will tell you this, right? So my seat is a lonely seat sometimes, and there's a lot of people that pull both directions. So how this really comes down for me is that's why my neutrality is really important, okay? I'm not taking a statement on anything saying we have to have this. This I feel strong about. We need aquatics for children. We do. I really believe that has to happen. But I need the people that I answer to, the Park Commission and the Council, to kind of steer this ship when I produce all these facts that we're gaining from everybody. And this is a big group, but this is not the 20-some thousand that are in the community. And there is, and you certainly will feel it the most in the neighborhood, but there's a balancing act here. And that's why I'm saying our goal is to have people supportive. And a lot of these times, my experience that I've been through it, there's some give and take on every end. There's some neighborhoods that have to give a little bit. The user groups have to give a little bit. And I want to reiterate this. This is years in the making. I mean, this isn't tomorrow. I'm telling you, it's not tomorrow. It's not next year. It's likely, a lot of this is years down the road. Some of it might be decades down the road. So that doesn't make it better. I'm not saying that if our community says keep a historic building, that we just get to say, well, 20 years from now, nobody will care. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that where we land will take time to get there. And we will have gauged the community for a long time, and I know that things have gone on that in the community related to roads and other things that sometimes there's a bitter taste. All I can tell you is the Park Recreation Forestry Department, we live for community, right? We're typically the people standing in the way for natural resources. We're standing in the way saying, hey, and we are here too, but there is a few 100,000 users that come through already based on what we know. And we are trying to balance, what does it look like over the next 100 years? So there's a lot that's going to be discussed yet. There's a lot. I expect the Park Commission meeting to be a lengthy discussion. And even though the next discussion is not decision making, it's going to be, what does it look like next? And we just keep working it out.
Well, I have to commend you because we have some of the most beautiful parks in the state. Every place we drive in and see this point, except in the south, first thing you see is an absolutely gorgeous park. And that in itself makes see this point really desirable for a lot of people to live in.
And I'll tell you, I appreciate it. Yep. That really comes down to our staff, though, and I'm not tooting the horns. We have a couple in the room, but we have a really dedicated staff. We've got a number of members that have been working for us for a long time, and they do a really good job. So go ahead. I'll come back to the front. I apologize.
Yes, I'm a little jaded on meetings like this because I came from an area where they were required by law to have meetings, get people's feedback on what they wanted to do, but then they did what they wanted to anyway. So how much of this is going to happen with what we have to say about it? But have anything.
The Park Commission has to have a discussion, and then they're going to gauge your feedback. They're going to gauge the survey, and then we're going to try to work through it. None of it's being built. There's no construction plans. There's no money for it. This is the first kind of crack at from bubble drawings to what it looks like. I can't say today what the level of change will be because I don't have a vote in it, right? But I will assure you with 100% transparency that every survey that is filled out is being tabulated. Every comment, the way they are being typed in, will come in a spreadsheet that they will get to review. And these folks live in our community. There are community members on the Park Commission. If you talk to them, some of them are 35-plus year servers on our Park Commission. I don't believe they're going to look their neighbors in the eyes and say, I didn't listen. I believe they're good-hearted volunteers, and most of them are going to gauge the feedback and make the best decision they can.
People in public service, they believe they know what's best, and that other people, they're just
Okay. Excellent. Dan, thank you. I think it's been a great presentation. As the current chair of the Park Board, I want to thank all of you for your feedback as members of the commission. Very valuable, everything you shared. So again, as Dan and everybody shared, this is just the beginning step of it. So what this is going to turn out, down the road, be a long, there's a long plan ahead of this. I guess one question I have as far as the commission, could we by hand do a survey if people are in favor of certain areas of this plan? Is that possible just by raising hands? As far as the dome or as far as...
My preference would be not to cause disruption between people in the room. Not that we couldn't. I just, some people might feel a certain way and not be comfortable in front of everybody. So, yeah, for sure. Yep. No, I totally understand the point. It's a very, very good thought. But I just think letting people fill the survey out and then come make their comments might be the best avenue. So I will say this. It is 8:10, so I'm going to break the meeting. If you have questions for me, come on up. But at this point, again, wholeheartedly, thank you for coming, and we'll keep working from here. So I appreciate it.